We don't have any district highlights or recognitions tonight, so moving along to reports. 4.01, Ms. Hamburg, Superintendent's comments.
Thank you. I wanted to take a moment to address the governor's proposed budget that just was released. In the new budget, it shows us receiving decreases in both years of the biennium. We would be decreased 6.8% in fiscal year 26 and an additional 3.4% in fiscal year 27. So that would be $2.8 million in fiscal year 26 and an additional $1.3 million in fiscal year 27 for a total of over $4.1 million loss over the biennium. So I guess I first want to say that we appreciate that he is proposing the continued phase-in of the Fair School Funding Plan, as we know there was some concern about whether or not that would happen. But we do have concern with his plan because it does not show an update of the costs to accommodate inflation. So he is proposing leaving those costs the same. So while they are updating the increases to our wealth factor based on our property value and our resident income level, not correspondingly updating the costs with that. So that is what causes us to show those losses. And our concern, as we've continued to say, is that when you're cutting our funding but continuing to add cost requirements, that's not, I think Nicole was the one to first say it, but not a sustainable business model. I do want to address, there's an article about our district that is on our Senate's website. And in that article, they criticize our cash balance. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. We are required to have a 5-year forecast by law. Our legislators only do a 2-year biennium budget, and if you just look at the first 2 years of our biennium, then yes, we do have enough cash. However, we're bringing in less money than we're spending each year while inflation continues to soar. Our 5-year forecast shows that we will run out of money quickly as we continue to pay ongoing expenses out of our cash balance. The article highlighted our positive cash balance, but it did not address our nearly $32 million negative cash balance in the last year of the required by law 5-year forecast period. The article also conveniently cropped out the state revenue lines from the picture of our forecast, which shows the reductions in our state funding. I've asked Nicole to share a little bit of information. She has a unique perspective as not only a current treasurer CFO, but also previously worked for the auditor's office, kind of about the recession that we faced previously and where cash balances come into play with the 5-year forecast.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. So I spent 7 years working for the state auditor's office in local government services from about 2005 until about 2012 before I started working for Kettering School District as the assistant treasurer there. So I lived at the auditor's office all through the recession and the coming out of the recession into 2012. And what I did during that whole time period was I worked on local governments and school districts that were in fiscal emergency. And at the time, local governments and school districts, public school districts, were criticized for not having adequate reserves to help weather economic downturns. And so just from my perspective, hearing all of those conversations and working on those projects back at that time, I find it ironic now that we're being criticized for having reserves so that we can weather these economic downturns that we're dealing with now. We've seen our funding cut significantly. And, in 2012, this school district actually had to delay payroll from one fiscal year to the next because of cash flow issues, because we didn't have adequate reserves to meet the required payrolls at the time. We had to severely reduce middle school programming after a levy failure due to lack of funds. And our board policy establishes a 90-day unreserved fund balance for every period of the 5-year forecast period. And this policy ensures that we don't go back and repeat what we did the last time in our history. And also, I do want to point out that our cash balance is being invested. We are very limited with Ohio law on what we can invest in, but we are maximizing our investments, and we are generating nearly $8 million a year in operating income from our investment earnings. And so as our cash balance declines, so does our opportunity for investment earnings, which would be another reduction in our operating revenue. lastly, we currently are sitting on about $25 million in credits from the state for our school facilities programs. We're in the Expedited Local Partnership Program. So far, we've accrued just over $25 million. Our turn has not come up yet. And so our intent with the cash balance was to help cover some facilities needs in conjunction with a bond issue, as we're sitting around and waiting for the state if we ever receive those funds from the facilities. So it's, I'm really disappointed to see something like this posted on our state Senate website. I think we've been nothing but respectful to our state lawmakers. We have a great relationship with them. I do intend to reach out to the Senate President, Rob McCauley, and our local senators here in Westerville, just to try to have some dialogue around that article and what it said and just how misleading it was overall. I was really disappointed to read that.
I think the other piece too in the article, he talks about how the average per pupil spending for K-12 public schools is $14,584, but it's a better deal to provide scholarships to private schools because they're only $61.66 or $84.08. But of course, not talking about the transportation, special education costs that we incur often for the private schools as well. So it's very misleading, and it also reads like we're getting that much funding from the state as opposed to what they're spending on vouchers, which is not accurate. We're getting just under $3 million per student from the state, while they're giving $61.66 or $8,408 for vouchers.
3,000 per student. You said 3 million.
Oh, I'm sorry, 3,000. Thank you.
I wish.
We would have no funding problems if that were the case. Yes, thank you.
And there's also a lot of conversation around property tax relief at the state also. And I can tell, I have told anyone that will listen to me that if the state does actually fully fund a funding formula that they have for schools, that is a form of property tax relief. We can see very clearly in the data how the state has shifted its share of the costs for education down to the local communities, mostly on homeowners and farmers, just over the last several decades. There's loads and loads of data out there that's available for the public to view. I have lots of presentations on the matter if you're ever interested in seeing any of them. So,
All right. We just kind of want to give that update, especially in lieu of the article that was posted, or in light of the article that was posted on the Senate website. So that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions or follow-up?
Well, I just wanted, for those that are maybe tuning in for the first time or haven't been keeping up with everything that's going on right now, could you just kind of, Nicole, share with us exactly how much in dollars this district would expect to lose because the governor's proposed budget was recently released?
yeah, so as Angie shared, the first year of the biennium, which is 26, would be 2.8 million, and then it's another 1.3 in the second year, which is fiscal year 27. So it'd be 4.1 million over the biennium period based on the governor's proposal. I will say this is just the start of the budget process. The governor's released his proposal. The House will then come out with their version. They are currently having hearings right now. Their first hearing in the House Education Committee is tomorrow at 2:15, and then I think they will have another one on the 26th, which is Wednesday. And then they're scheduled to have another one on March the 4th. And so I have already submitted testimony. I intend to go down there and testify. I may go tomorrow. They told me they're going to do it based on proximity to the State House, so we're a little close, so I may be pushed off until Wednesday, not quite sure yet. But then the House will have their version of a budget, and then the Senate it'll go through the Senate's process, and then it'll come to conference committee, which is the House and the Senate, and they'll try to reconcile the differences between the budget with hopefully having it on the governor's desk by June 30th for signature. They do have to have a budget in place to start the new fiscal year. They've done temporary measures in the past. Hopefully they'll get a budget in place. I do also want to mention, I was on a webinar today and listened to all of the additional unfunded mandates that are also included in the budget bill. So I do find it ironic that anyone would think that it is feasible to increase services and reduce revenues. I don't, like Angie said, I don't know of any business model that works that way. So, but that's where we're at. So just the beginning stages of the conversation. I would encourage anybody that's interested in this conversation to reach out there to their local legislator. just see what their thoughts are on it.
And I think just my last, I guess, in closing thought is these reductions are in addition to, we already received a reduction this year of about 4 million. So as inflation continues to increase, our state funding continues to decrease, mandates continue to increase. So any help that you can provide on helping to reach out to legislators would be greatly appreciated.
I just want to also add, and I don't think I missed it, so my apologies if I did, but some of our construction costs, like some of our construction dollars for our facilities, is also being given to private entities to build schools or to expand private facilities. And so that's on top of I know you had talked about our credit, which I think not probably everybody understands. But that's an additional hit that we're taking as well in terms of funding that we could be using to update our facilities.
Yeah, so we have been, as part of the last bond project and some of Westerville South, we have been accumulating credits with the state because the state's calculations say that they should fund 35% of our facilities projects. But they don't have the funding available, so they basically take turns with school districts. It's a rank schedule that they have. When I started with the district in 2018, they told me it'd be about 5 or 6 years. Every time I asked them, that was, 6.5 years ago, every time I ask them, they tell me it's about 5 or 6 years. So I don't know when our number will be up for that, but we are accumulating credits, and we're during our last review that we had with them, we're just a little over 25 million that we haven't been funded from that facilities project. So.
Thank you.
And I know you said this, I just want to make this super clear to folks who maybe don't work with the state budget every day, that it's a biennial budget, so the operating budget is a 2-year budget, but we have to forecast 5 years. And so there's no guarantee after the current budget what the next budget will look like, right? So we're in a situation of having to forecast out 5 years. We have board policy about needing 90 days of cash reserves on hand, but the state budget is a 2-year budget. So you see the challenge that creates in terms of it makes you, make sure you really have that cash reserve because you don't know what's going to happen into the next biennium.
Well, yeah, and I will say this last biennium, so the current biennium that we're in now is fiscal year 24, which was our last fiscal year, and the current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 25. When we were talking about this in the spring of 23, coming into fiscal year 24, I had no idea that the state was going to reduce our revenues by $4 million this year in the middle of a biennium. I didn't expect that. There's a lot of school districts that were really surprised by that because the assumptions that were used in the estimates didn't account for true inflationary costs for housing. So they look at our local wealth factor based on our property values and our resident income. Well, property values in 2023, the reappraisals plus whatever our resident income looked like was apparently much higher than what they had used in those calculations. And so I was really surprised by that, did not expect that, and I continue to be surprised by the things that I see come out that either add additional costs to us or try to reduce our revenues in some way or another. So that's why we have this conversation.
Any other?
Just wanted to add one last thing as per that article that was on the Senate's website is that the author maintained that our funding model is constitutional. The funding model, let's be clear, is not constitutional. It was ruled unconstitutional, I believe, 4 separate times. And essentially the courts gave up and said, we have told you 4 times you need to remedy this, fix it. And we just haven't done it. So they're flouting the law like they have in, many other cases here recently, but the funding model we have currently is not constitutional.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I sat in a webinar, and I'm looking for the numbers now, on Friday with the Fair School Funding Work Group that shared a graph, and this is, at a macro level, just not Westerville schools. So during the Droff decision, the state was picking up a little over 42% of the share. In 2023, the state was picking up, oh, my eyes are terrible, almost 40%. So under the Droff decision, by quite a bit. And then if implemented with the governor's proposal, so our current share, the state's share is 38% for fiscal year 25, and if the state average, on average, yes. This is the total what the state funds for education across Ohio. And then the 2027 under the governor's proposal would be down to about 32%. So quite a ways away from where we were during the Droff decision days, back when that was ruled unconstitutional 4 times over. So yeah, I would contend that our funding formula is probably not constitutional. We would need a court to tell us that, but I feel like I have a pretty good idea.
Thank you. I appreciate that update.